Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well, and I just hope you're going to get that lovely coffee or that effervescent sparkling drink, because I've got a lovely story for you tonight. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, it was one of those early March days in Washington State, which made you falsely believe that spring had to be here. But in reality, you knew that the winter was not eager to loosen her tenaciously dogged grip that she had over everything, like a foreboding ice queen from a land where no one had ever seen spring or summer, rather like the Chronicles of Narnia, as this vindictively evil ice queen had a stubbornly steel stranglehold over everything, and was obstinately reluctant to let go, much like a dog with a bone. Well, not without a spirited fight anyway. But in the last few days, Morgan had noticed some blissful fleeting moments when a warm sunshine would spill magnanimously through a grey, uncongenial sky, eagerly melting some of that stout-hearted snow away, and triumphantly beating back some of those icy cold winter chills. Slowly but surely, it seemed that the persevering winter was hanging on to the very fine threads of borrowed time, and would soon become a diminished, defeated foe, as the audacious determination of spring eventually got the upper hand, as bronze boughs became filled with bright green leaves, and the grass was plundered with the first sign of yellow daffodils, peeking their bright heads through the earthen soil. Morgan Ramsay was very glad about this, as for him, winter was not only about a chilly season, where the cold nipped right through to your bones, but it represented an implacable memory that would turn his heart as cold as ice. He remembers that inauspicious bleak winter evening, as well as if it happened only yesterday, even though a year had gone by now. How he wished he could erase that progressively unrelenting recall, like the white chalk off a teacher's blackboard, but some memories stick hard as old chewing gum underneath a school desk that has hardened over the years and is impossible to remove. Morgan had managed not to think about that evening for a long while, but for some peculiar reason, the memory unrolled itself in his head, as if he was seeing snapshots from one of the old projectors his father used to own. Morgan had eagerly, with an enthusiastic ebullience like a young child, hurried home to his apartment in Seattle to observe an appalling sight that you just can't unsee. He knew he was not the first, nor would he be the last to have encountered something that ripped you to the core like this. But let's just say, when it happens to you personally, it's another story. It rudely intrudes with your self-esteem, and punches a huge hole in your heart that no amount of polyfiller will ever be able to fill up. As he reflects on the painful memory, he squeezes his eyes as tightly as he can, as if the act of closing his eyes will somehow block out the jarring, infelicious recollection of that dreadful moment he would so much rather forget. But some memories stubbornly refuse to burn, like damp logs that simply won't catch on fire. Morgan had believed he was hopelessly in love at the time. He thought he'd met the woman of his dreams, who he'd spend the rest of his life with, the mother of his children, the one who he would one day grow old with. When he met Emma Radcliffe, he'd been absolutely certain she was the one for him. There was not a fleeting doubt in his mind about that, and he hadn't hesitated to pop the question, as when you know, you know. They were soon to be married in the fall of the following year. Glamorous, opulent invitations had been sent out. The prestigious, grandiose venue had been booked, and even his parents had congratulated him profusely, and compliments from them did not come lightly. "You've indeed found yourself a good woman. She's quite the charmer," said his father. "I mean, she's a very pretty girl, and that's a good start, of course, but looks are fleeting. She's funny, a good personality. That's what matters at the end of the day." It seemed that they'd got Emma Radcliffe all wrong, except for Morgan's discerning, wise grandmother, whom he'd sensed did not approve of Emma at the get-go. It would seem Emma Radcliffe might have been able to skillfully pull the wool over everybody else's eyes, guilefully outwitting his family and friends. But the perspicacious Mrs. Betty Phillips, Morgan's grandmother, was not easily duped or hoodwinked by anyone she met. Morgan had never been happier as when he and Emma became engaged. So why had he not seen this coming? Why were there no subtle signs that he'd picked up in his fiancée's body language that might have revealed to him that she was not on the same page as he was? Morgan had been on a 3-day work conference in New York and returned home to Seattle a day early, with a huge bouquet of mixed roses in his hands, along with a large bottle of French champagne for his fiancée. It was snowing in Seattle. The pavements were swathed in glistening carpets of white, while the bronze boughs of the trees were weighted down with white crystals. The whole area looked like a magical winter wonderland, with the bright effulgent lights of the city only enhancing the dramatic look of the shimmering white snow. Morgan pulls out the iron key for the apartment from his pocket of his warm woolen jacket. Even though his hands are swathed in toasty leather gloves, they feel numb from the cold, as an icy wind had pummelled him all the way from the parking bay back to the apartment. But he successfully manages to turn the key in the lock without making much of a noise. He had in mind to whisk his fiancée off to a fabulous restaurant in town. He knew a wonderful cosy place that boasted a welcoming crackling fire in the hearth. Morgan surreptitiously opens the apartment door, as discreetly as possible, delighting in the idea of surprising his fiancée, who was not expecting him home early. He judiciously leaves his luggage in the entrance hall, removing his grey woolly beanie from his head, his matching scarf and gloves, placing them all on the entrance hall table, while he diligently hangs his jacket on one of the hooks to join the long row of coats and weatherproof jackets that are hanging on other hooks there. The apartment was pleasantly warm, with the central heating on. Morgan knows Emma will be thrilled to see him, as he will be to see her. He smiles jubilantly to himself as he tiptoes into the apartment, like a leopard stealthily loitering in the dark shadows, creeping up on its unsuspecting prey. He glances furtively around the glamorous open-plan apartment, where the entrance hall magnanimously opens out into a living room, a breakfast area, and a kitchen. All the bamboo Venetian blinds have been drawn, which is probably a good idea, as if you leave them open, you'll be likely to see into your opposite neighbour's apartment. Everything is as it should be. The well-presented furnished apartment they rent together is in pristine apple pie order. He can pick up the pleasant whiff of freshly brewed coffee in the air, and notices a glass carafe filled with coffee on the white quartz kitchen countertop that is still warm to the touch, as if it was made only a short while ago. In recent months, the feminine influences of his fiancée have dappled the apartment with a sunny convivial warmth, with vases of flowers, brightly coloured scatter cushions, potted plants, interesting sculptural ornaments, and very exciting, vibrant artwork. Much that he and his fiancée had picked up together on a recent trip to Marrakesh in Morocco, where they'd bartered with the street vendors there for everything that they'd wanted to transform their Seattle apartment. The bright colours of some of those materials, the pots and tiles from those street stalls, had been dazzling, some of them gloriously vivid, were adding such cheer to the apartment. Emma had purchased some boxes of colourful tiles to be used in the backsplashes of the kitchen walls. That was, of course, if the owner of the apartment would be agreeable to such a makeover, as the current kitchen tiles were rather drab, and these would certainly glamorise the whole look, giving it a much more homely but warm appearance. Morgan's eyes sweep over to the seating area of the living room, where the cream sofas are scattered liberally with bright, colourful cushions. He notices a bottle of Claude de Bois wine on the table. He touches it. It appears cold. He glances at the label, raising a brow. This is not a cheap bottle of wine, and far exceeds his personal budget. There are 2 glasses on the table, one with a peach lipstick mark on its rim, which would belong to Emma, and the other glass remains perfectly clean. Strange, he thinks to himself, crumpling up his forehead. Maybe Emma had one of her friends over for a drink a short while ago. Maybe the friend brought over an expensive bottle of wine. Of course, that would be it. There's a large pizza box on the coffee table. He opens it up. The pizza is warm. Half of it has been eaten. Damn, he thinks, feeling somewhat disappointed. Emma won't feel like going out to dinner tonight if she's only just eaten pizza with a girlfriend. He observes an intrusive large glass ashtray filled with hundreds of used cigarette butts. This time the frown lines between his two eyebrows furrows. This he does find odd, as neither he nor his fiancée smoke. There is a box of cigarettes with a lighter on its top with the engraved initial N on it. Maybe Emma has been entertaining a girlfriend while he's been away who smokes like a chimney. The unpleasant tobacco smell seems to have permeated all their furnishings, which is probably why 2 scented candles are alight, complemented by the dim light of the lamps that creates a romantic atmosphere. The music centre is playing some soft classical background music that Emma occasionally enjoys listening to when they cook dinner together in the evenings. The apartment seems very quiet, so Morgan retreats down the narrowed passageway to the bedroom, where he knows he will soon find Emma. He cannot wait to see her. It's been 2 days, but he's really missed her a lot. He can hear muttering voices in the bedroom and assumes the television set is on. His fiancée is probably watching one of her favourite soaps. The door is slightly ajar. Morgan peeks into the bedroom with a bright smile on his face, but his smile fades. It evaporates and dies. He draws in a deep, astonished breath, his heart thundering violently in his chest, the bile rising up in the back of his throat, so the bitter, nauseous taste permeates his whole mouth with a vile, odious impregnation. Emma is in the bedroom with another man, in the throes of a heated passion. They are both moaning in gasps of pleasure. Morgan stares blankly for a moment in abject horror. The couple are blindly oblivious to his presence, as they're so caught up in the bubble of their carnal desires. Morgan hurriedly retreats from the repugnant, gut-wrenching scene. This he had not expected to see. The love of his life cheating on him. This sort of thing happens to other people, not to him. Morgan feels like an intruder in his own apartment, as if he has invaded somebody else's private space. With the furtive slyness of a fox, he clandestinely replaces his beanie, scarf and glove, while throwing on his warm winter jacket. He sub-rosa gathers his briefcase, the bouquet of roses, the champagne, and the small overnight suitcase on wheels, and then he closes the front door behind him, hurrying off to his truck that is parked in the large apartment bay downstairs, where there are no select parking spots for anyone. You can pretty much park wherever you like. His eyes briefly browse the cars in the bay, to see if any cars stand out from the regular ones he usually sees. A silver BMW he doesn't recognise is parked next to his fiancée's car. He wonders if the BMW belongs to the mysterious stranger that's currently occupying his bedroom with his fiancée. I mean, how could she betray him like this? Did she really have so little respect for him? Morgan's emotions teeter from anger to fury, to hurt, sorrow, regret, and a disappointment so incredibly bitter it would easily outrival the blistering cold conditions outside. Morgan climbs into his car and steadily drives onwards into the unwelcome arms of a bitterly cold winter evening. The snow is falling down in large flakes like white confetti. It looks beguilingly pretty. Luckily he has a full tank of petrol on him, so he won't need to stop at a petrol pump any time soon. He decides to drive to his grandmother's farmhouse. His grandmother lives a hair's breadth away from the Okanagan State Forest in Wenatchee. The forest itself stretches from the north to the south, from the Canadian border to the Goats Rock Wilderness. A large, diverse landscape, usually dominated by subalpine firs, Engelmann spruces, logpole pines, quaking aspen trees, ponderosas and Douglas firs, that easily encompass over 308 million acres along the eastern slopes of the Cascade Range. Let's just say in recent years, after his grandfather's fortuitous death, when he died of a cardiac arrest over 7 years ago, his grandmother had sold most of the apple orchards on their property to the neighbouring farm, but she still lived in the old original double-storey farmhouse, on a sizable plot of land, but it was a lot more manageable, with exquisite mountainous views. Betty Phillips, his grandmother, was staunchly independent, rigidly set in her ways, and would claim it would be over her dead body that she'd ever end up in a nursing home. Mrs. Phillips was in her late 80s and was as fit as a fiddle and as strong as an ox, She looked remarkably good for her age, although her porcelain skin was very delicate, with a plethora of fine lines around her eyes that only seemed to accentuate their cornflower blue colour. Her thick straight white hair was done in a flattering pixie haircut, which was often colourfully enhanced with pink highlights that was really rather flattering on the elderly woman. She had never been to a doctor a day in her life. She'd never even had a mammogram or a flu vaccine, and she wasn't going to change the habits of a lifetime. She had the firm belief that when it was your time to go, it was your time, and interfering medicines would only serve to postpone the inevitable. She wanted to ensure that when she died, it would be as natural as an alpine flower in the field, and she believed death was absolutely not the end, so it held for her no fear whatsoever. Morgan had always confided in his grandmother, never in his parents nor his brother Paul. They had never understood him like his grandmother did. For some reason, ever since he was small, Morgan and his grandmother had an extra special bond, a camaraderie, a natural fellowship and rapport. They'd always been incredibly close, with a deep kindred connection. Right now he needed her reassurance more than ever. He felt like a vulnerable boy again, who'd fallen on the ground and grazed his knee rather badly. Only his grandmother could put it right, and kiss it better for him. On reflection, it had been his grandmother who had not been enthusiastic about his relationship with Emma. Morgan wondered if she'd seen something in Emma that everybody else had so obviously missed. He knew his grandmother was a dab hand with the tarot. She had played the tarot since she was knee-high to a grasshopper. Many people came to her for a reading, and were absolutely stunned by her accuracy. Morgan wondered if she'd seen the downfall of his relationship with Emma in the cards. He suspected that his grandmother would have asked the cards all about her. That would be the natural thing for her to do. When Morgan had invited his grandmother to their apartment in Seattle for dinner, to celebrate their engagement and to meet Emma, he remembered his grandmother looked at her as if staring at her through a transparent glass pane, like an open book she was reading, whereupon she could decipher all the chapters. There had been an ambiguous, faraway, troubled look in her eyes. Morgan could almost describe it as a knowing, as if his grandmother was scanning their future through a telescope. Morgan was certain that his grandmother had not warmed to his fiancé. It bothered him greatly, more than he cared to admit at the time. Nobody likes it when a member of their family does not like the other half that they intend to marry. Ostensibly, Morgan valued his grandmother's approval of his relationship with Emma. It certainly mattered to him, over and above anybody else's opinion, as his grandmother was judiciously discerning. At the dinner table that evening, Emma had laid on the charm as thickly as excess butter being smothered over a bagel. She had gone the extra mile to be the perfect hostess, but all the charm, the flattery, the great hospitality had been like water off a duck's back, as far as his grandmother was concerned. It would seem that the old woman had been rigidly stiff all evening, her back so incredibly straight it would have made a pencil look crooked. Throughout the dinner, in between delicious mouthfuls of food that his grandmother probably never tasted, she had clandestinely studied Emma through a silvery gaze that had made his fiancé very uncomfortable indeed, and when she'd got up to leave, she'd almost growled at Emma. "Don't you dare break my grandson's heart. Do you understand me, young lady? Or you'll have me to deal with." Even Morgan had been stunned by his grandmother's graceless, abrupt comments towards Emma. That was a bolt out of the blue he hadn't seen coming. "Bloody hell," said Emma. "Did you see that? Your grandmother barked at me. I know she doesn't like me. She's been giving me disapproving looks all evening. What the hell is her problem?"
"Don't worry about it," Morgan had tried to reassure Emma. "It's nothing, I can promise you of that. I've always had an exceptionally close bond with my grandmother. She's just very protective over me. She once rarely laid into my mother, you know, for grounding me for a week because she said I deliberately broke one of her crystal vases. My grandmother told my mother that it was an accident, that she should be ashamed of herself for punishing me so severely. My mother felt so incredibly bad that she took me to the toy shop and asked me to choose anything I wanted. I naturally chose the most expensive toy train there was, but my mother didn't even flinch."
"Sounds like your grandmother's got your back."
"I'm sure she will come around to liking you, Emma. I mean, how could she not? He said to her encouragingly, taking his beloved fiancée into his arms and kissing her tenderly on the cheek. I mean, what is there not to love? Give her time. She'll soon come around. Just you wait and see.
Emma had pulled a contemptuous face.
I don't like her. I don't want her coming around to dinner ever again or to this flat. I mean, I treated her like a queen tonight, and she was so indifferent to me. Hostile, even. She kept looking at me with these judgmental eyes, as if she didn't like me at all, for no reason.
Morgan reflects over this, as his truck cautiously rolls forward on its heavy rubber tyres, past prepossessing indistinguishable landmarks and countryside that he cannot see clearly, as it's dappled by a faint scattering of moonlight that is so elusively sheer that all the natural snow-covered vegetation, the hilly embankments, the meadows, the sprawling thickets of trees are deeply lost in the murky shadows, camouflaged by the tenebrous coat that the night is wearing. It would seem secrets are hidden in its deep pockets, buried beneath heavy lining, where nighttime predators become blurred, indiscernible, where the trees, the moon and the stars are the silent witnesses of the mysteries that unfold under the inconspicuous mantle of darkness that so few may ever know about. Finally, Morgan turns off the main road, a long ribbon of grey asphalt lined with snow that has been well travelled by many passing trucks, to the more treacherous, rugged, uneven road, thickly covered in placid, unagitated snow, where no cars have recently frequented, that audaciously invite Morgan's four-wheeler to judder and shake precariously, almost as if he's taken a rather challenging ride at the fairground. The light from his headlights washes the road in a bright illumination, the reflectant light bouncing off onto the sides, enabling Morgan to see the familiar landmarks he knows so well. He passes the vast orchard of apple trees, draped in white snow, once owned by his grandmother, that had been sold off to the neighbouring farmer. They had been fenced off with post and rail fencing. Finally he takes a left-hand turning towards his grandmother's property. The hard-wood 5-bar gate had been left wide open, with its bold sign which reads Scarborough Fair Orchards, and his truck wobbles down the long driveway. He glances briefly at the time. The dashboard clock registers 8:30. It's not too late. His grandmother should still be up and about, bustling busily around the kitchen, or watching something entertaining on the box. Morgan feels the familiar thrill of excitement that he felt as a young boy, as he observes his grandmother's farmhouse coming into view, like an old welcome friend he hasn't seen in a long while. And within its whitewashed walls are buried many wistful nostalgic memories of the fun times he'd spent here with his grandparents. There had been a plethora of laughter tumbling around the home, happy times where he'd spent Thanksgivings, Christmases, Easters, birthdays, and good old family Sunday lunches here. It would always be good to see his beloved grandmother, especially now, he thought. The charming farmhouse with its slightly crooked chimney is washed in a soft shower of pearly moonlight that subdues the velvety darkness, making the house appear warmingly inviting. There are a couple of lights on downstairs, and one in the upstairs window, where his grandmother sleeps. He notices a twitch of the curtain in the downstairs living room area, and then moments later he hears the front door unbolting. His grandmother is standing outside, waiting for him, with a big warm smile on her wizened face, almost as if his impromptu visit is not altogether unexpected. She's wearing a warm pair of brown trousers, a camel woolen knitted sweater, with a very floppy open neckline, along with a pair of rather zooty warm leather boots. Morgan climbs out of his truck reluctantly, slamming the door behind him, and then eagerly runs towards his grandmother. It's like he can't get to her fast enough. He gives the slight woman a big hug. He doesn't want to let go, not ever. "This is a lovely surprise, Morgan," his grandmother chuckles. "It's wonderful, wonderful to see you. Come on in. It's freezing out there. Take your coat off, for goodness sake. Hang it up over there on that hook, and take off your boots. They're caked in snow. Leave them on the shoe rack over there." "Let me have a good look at you, Morgan," says his grandmother, looking into his misty green eyes. She brushes his hair away from his face.
Oh dear, look at you. You're a sorry sight. I know that look, Morgan, only too well, from when you were a little boy. You can't fool your old grandmother. I can see you're terribly upset. You don't have to put on a brave face, not for me. I'm your grandmother, for goodness sake. Let it out. If you need to cry, I want you to cry. I always believed that men should not be afraid to do so. There's nothing to be ashamed of in having a good old cry. Come on in, she says, before you catch your death of cold. It's been freezing out here. The winter hasn't exactly been kind on my old bones. Let me make you a cup of sweet tea. Everything is better after a sweet cup of tea, I promise, with a dash of brandy in it. My mother used to give that to me when I was a little girl, and it made things so much better. It really did. The kitchen is wonderfully warm with the wood-burning stove on, so you'll be as snug as a bug in there. Morgan nods. The unshed tears remain dormant behind his eyelids. But he cannot cry. Grown men don't cry, despite what his grandmother says. But he does know. In truth, he's close to bawling his eyes out. The hurt he feels is insurmountable, the disappointment far worse. And then there is a brooding anger, more with himself than with Emma. He's angry he never saw this coming. Morgan sits at the old kitchen table, where he sat as a young boy. He's watching his grandmother busying herself around the dark green range oven, putting on a green kettle to boil, and bringing out her finest tea set. Morgan's grandmother only ever brings that very elegant tea set out to entertain her most important guests. Morgan perceived the kindly gesture was his grandmother's way of expressing her great love for him. It's English breakfast tea. I've made it strong for you. I've added a nice big slug of brandy in it. They always say when you've had a shock, tea should be very strong, you know. She pours Morgan a cup, offering him the jug of milk and the bowl of sugar. Morgan spoons out 3 teaspoons of sugar into the teacup, followed by a splash of milk. He stirs and takes a sip. The warmth of the tea that glides down the back of his throat, and its rich sweetness seems to make him feel marginally better. It's obviously not an old wife's tale. The tea helps, and the brandy burns the back of his throat, but it's not unpleasant. What on earth has she done, Morgan? His grandmother asks him, raising a cynical eyebrow. I'm assuming you're upset about Emma. That's why you're here, is it not? Morgan, like an unbridled wild horse, cannot restrain himself any longer. The words tumble out of his mouth as fast as an obstreperous water from a lively faucet. Granny, I got home tonight, a day early from my business conference. I wanted to surprise Emma, and He stumbles on his words awkwardly. And, You found Emma in bed with another man. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Says his grandmother, the corners of her mouth turning down into a sizable frown. Morgan is grateful. His grandmother had completed his sentence for him. It hurt too much to say the words out loud. It made it seem more real. The words were like cement stuck at the back of his throat. How did you know? How could you possibly know? His grandmother shrugs. My first impressions of her, I'm afraid, Morgan. They weren't very good. The tarot cards only confirmed what I already knew. It didn't look very good. I so hoped I was wrong, but I could see this coming. I sensed it. So you did a reading on Emma. Why am I not surprised? What did you pick up about her, Granny? I need to know. It may make me understand why she did this to me. Have I done something objectionable? Doesn't she love me any more? I mean, why would she do this to me? It makes no sense at all. And the worst part of it all is I didn't see any signs that she wasn't happy with our relationship. I mean, you only cheat if you're not happy with your lot. Am I right? Not necessarily, sweetheart. Some people cheat because of the thrill. The risk of being caught doing something naughty is a little like living on the edge, you know. Do you really want to know what my tarot cards had to say about her? His grandmother asked gently. Haven't you been through enough already, Morgan? I knew that woman would break your heart. I knew it in my gut. And the cards don't lie. They told me as much. Granny, what did you see in the cards? Your readings are usually spot on. I need to know. I want to know. His grandmother pauses. I saw that Emma does not love you, that she's never loved anyone, and probably never will. She doesn't even like herself all that much, for that matter. Loving yourself is very significant in a relationship to start with. You want to receive love and give love freely, but she has a narcissistic tendency to her character and enjoys spontaneously living in the moment, exploiting and using people to her own end. I think the cheating for her was a thrill. The best way I can describe her is like a female praying mantis that is eating her partner alive while they copulate together, although her partner is oblivious that he's been eaten. She wears a mask when she meets people. Not literally, of course. She plays the part of being as charming as ever. But underneath it all, she's terribly lost. And the only person that can fix her is herself. I could see she would never be happy. Her restless spirit will be like a frog hopping from one lily leaf to another, always certain that there's going to be a lily leaf for her that is better than the last one. But she'll never find it, you know. I saw this very clearly in the cards, that she'll cheat on every man she meets at some point. So it's never personal to them, because she can't help herself, you see. It's who she is. She's easily bored, easily distracted, easily beguiled, easily seduced. She's looking for validation. So when she beds another man, she thinks it'll make her feel better about herself. But it never does, you see. She's never going to find self-esteem from outside herself. You have to look within to find that.
What are you saying, Granny? That she was always destined to cheat on me?
That's what the cards told me over and over again. The same cards kept coming up, no matter how hard I shuffled. The message was always very clear. Believe me, Morgan, I so wanted them to say something else for you. That you'd met your soulmate. That she'd be loyal, faithful, devoted, loving, and your very best friend. How much I wanted that for you. What I'm trying to say is that her cheating behaviour is not about you. You've done nothing wrong. This is so not personal. But it was inevitable. It was going to happen. The pack of cards was going to come crashing down. In truth, I'm glad it happened now, rather than later on. It'll save you from getting a divorce. You cannot build a relationship on a crumbling foundation. Sooner or later, something has to give. And I'm afraid Emma Radcliffe has not got the stability to ensure a solid foundation for an enduring relationship.
Why did you not tell me this, Granny, before?
What? You wanted me to interfere in your life? I couldn't possibly do that. You were so incredibly happy with her. I could see how besotted you were. I didn't want to ruin your joy. Sometimes in life things have to play out for themselves. Hard lessons have to be learnt. It's not for me to set a cat among the pigeons and cause upset. You were in love with Emma. If I came along and told you to end things with her, that would have gone down with you like a lead balloon. You'd have been most upset with me. You'd think I was putting my nose in where it didn't belong. And you'd be right about that.
You're probably right.
I am right. You need to put this behind you, Morgan. Move on with your life. You don't need to live in regret. I assure you, take it from an old woman like me that has lived a little. Regret is a complete waste of time. What happened between you and Emma is not all bad. Some of our most successful lessons in life come from a place of hurt. You must realise Emma's behaviour is not about you. Morgan feels comforted about his grandmother's reassuring words. Everything she's saying makes perfect sense. Emma's the one with the problem, not him. Her desire to cheat on him was a reflection of her own sense of inadequacy. But even so, it did hurt. How could it not? He had invested so much in their relationship, and now it was all over.
Granny, Emma doesn't know I know about her cheating on me.
Betty raises an eyebrow. But I don't understand. You caught her in bed with another man. How can she not know you know what she's been getting up to behind your back?
Well, I wanted to surprise her, so I crept into the apartment. I should have realised something was up. There were glasses of wine out. I can't believe I was so foolish. The living room looked romantic, although it stank of cigarettes. There was soft floating music in the house. I could hear noises from the bedroom. I thought it was the television. I peeked over the door, and there she was with another man, in the throes of passion. She's never been that wild with me. I was quite shocked, but I didn't barge into the room as you might expect. I discreetly left. It was better that way.
So Emma has no idea that you know she's cheated on you. She assumes you're going ahead with your wedding next fall. Is that right?
That's right, she does.
You need to contact her. Tell her to come over to my house tomorrow evening, that you need to talk. I think it'll be good if you talk to her on your own turf. My house has always been a second home to you. You'll be comfortable here.
Isn't she going to think that is decidedly odd? I left the airport, came straight to your place, not to the apartment like I usually would. Won't she smell a rat?
It doesn't matter what she thinks. You need to get her around here, in the most dignified way possible. Tell her the wedding is off, and tell her you returned home and found her in a compromising position with another man. You need to do the right thing. You have to have it out with her. If you break up with her without telling her why you're ending the relationship, that will be so destroying for her. Imagine all your life wondering why you were suddenly dumped. Despite everything, she does need to know the truth and face the consequences of what she's actually done. You need to see Emma to end things with her. It's the decent thing to do. You're the one that's squeaky clean, remember that. She's the one who's got mud on her boots, so you have nothing to be ashamed of. Of course, it's not going to be easy. It never is. Break up always hurts. And even if she was never in love with you, she certainly liked you enough to commit to marrying you. So she is going to be gutted, and in for one hell of a surprise when you break it off. So I would send her a text if I was you. Best avoid speaking to her at the minute, though. So there we are. That's the end of part 1. Part 2 is tomorrow night. Until next time, goodbye and good night.